RiP Captain, thank you for your service. From his bedroom window, he could see the harbor, where fishing boats rocked gently with the waves, and men and women worked tirelessly to provide for their families. Jim loved watching them. There was something about the discipline, the strength, and the quiet pride in their work that fascinated him. Even as a child, he felt a deep curiosity about the world beyond his town and a desire to make a difference. Jim's family was small but close. His father, Robert, was a retired sailor who had spent most of his life at sea. Robert carried the stories of his journeys like treasures, tales of storms, distant lands, and the camaraderie of men who worked together through danger. Jim's mother, Margaret, was a schoolteacher, known for her kindness and patience. She encouraged Jim to read, learn, and dream big, always telling him that a curious mind and a kind heart were two of the most valuable gifts a person could have. Jim listened carefully, soaking in her words, but he was also drawn to his father's world of adventure and duty. As a boy, Jim was full of energy and ideas. He built small wooden boats in the backyard, pretending they would sail across oceans. He would race his friends through the streets on their bicycles, imagining himself as a captain leading his crew through storms and battles. School fascinated him, but he often found himself thinking about responsibility and courage, the kind he saw in his father and the older sailors at the harbor. By the time he was in high school, it was clear that Jim had a strong sense of purpose. He was not content to simply live a quiet life. He wanted to do something meaningful, something that would matter to people beyond his own family. Jim's high school years were a mix of challenges and growth. He excelled in subjects like history and physical education, showing both intelligence and endurance. But more than grades, he cared about character. He joined the school's community service club, helped younger students with their homework, and volunteered at local events. Every small act felt important to him. He began to understand that leadership was not just about being in charge. It was about responsibility, reliability, and helping others, even when no one was watching. During these years, Jim also faced the realities of growing up in a small town. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and fear of not being enough. Some of his classmates took paths he could not understand, chasing short-term pleasures rather than long-term goals. Jim felt the pressure to make choices that would define the rest of his life. He often spent nights sitting by the harbor, staring at the horizon, thinking about what he wanted to become. The sea seemed to whisper answers back to him, telling him that courage and discipline would guide his way, even when the path seemed uncertain. The idea of joining the military first came to Jim when he was 16. He had attended a local ceremony where veterans shared their experiences, and something about their stories of duty, sacrifice, and camaraderie struck a chord deep inside him. He admired how they worked together, trusted each other, and faced challenges with courage. Jim began to think that serving his country was a way to live out the values he held dear: honor, responsibility, and protecting others. He spoke about it with his father, who listened carefully. Robert could see the seriousness in his son's eyes. He did not push him or try to convince him otherwise. Instead, he shared his own experiences, explaining the difficulties and the rewards of choosing a life of service. By the time Jim turned 18, the decision was clear. He wanted to enlist in the military. His parents were proud but nervous. They knew the road he had chosen would be demanding and dangerous. Margaret worried about the challenges he would face, the distance from family, and the harsh realities of life in service. Robert, though confident in Jim's abilities, felt the quiet ache of letting his son step into the unknown. Yet, both knew that Jim's heart was set, and trying to stop him would only hold him back. They gave him their blessing, knowing that this was the first step in a journey that would shape his entire life. Enlisting was not easy. The process tested Jim physically, mentally, and emotionally. He spent hours running, lifting weights, and learning survival skills. He studied history, strategies, and leadership principles. Every obstacle he faced only strengthened his determination. There were days when exhaustion and doubt crept in, when he questioned if he was truly ready for the challenges ahead. But each time he reminded himself of the people he admired, the veterans, his father, and even ordinary townsfolk who showed courage in small ways every day. He wanted to honor them through his own commitment. During this time, Jim also discovered the importance of friendship and support. At the training camp, he met other young men and women who shared similar dreams. They came from different towns, backgrounds, and families, but they had one goal in common: to serve with honor. They trained together, encouraged each other, and sometimes struggled together. Jim quickly became known for his calm attitude, resilience, and willingness to help others, even when he was tired. These early bonds would later become a foundation for the camaraderie he would experience in more challenging situations. One of the most formative moments in Jim's early service training came during a long field exercise. For days, he and his team were pushed to their limits, navigating rough terrain, enduring fatigue, and facing unexpected challenges. Many of his peers complained or gave up, but Jim focused on the task, reminding himself that discipline and perseverance were more important than comfort or recognition. At night, when the group finally rested, he would sit quietly, thinking about his family, his town, and the life he wanted to build. These moments of reflection helped him understand that service was not just about physical strength. It was about mental fortitude, empathy, and the ability to act with integrity, even under pressure. By the end of his initial training, Jim had grown in ways he had never imagined. He was stronger, more disciplined, and more aware of the responsibilities that came with his chosen path. But more than that, he had developed a sense of purpose that would guide him throughout his life. He realized that being a soldier was not about glory or recognition. It was about commitment, loyalty, and the quiet courage to do what was right, even when no one was watching. Jim's journey from a curious boy in a small coastal town to a determined young man preparing for military service was just the beginning. The values instilled in him by his family, the lessons learned from his community, and the experiences of his early training would shape the man he was becoming. He carried with him a deep respect for duty, a love for his family, and a desire to make a meaningful contribution to the world. The harbor where he had spent so many childhood evenings seemed to send him off with a silent blessing, the waves whispering that the path ahead, though challenging, was the right one. As Jim packed his belongings for the journey ahead, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew there would be hardships, sacrifices, and moments that would test his limits. Yet he also felt confident that he was ready to embrace them. Every step he had taken, every story he had heard, every lesson he had learned, had led him to this moment. With a final glance at his hometown, he took a deep breath, knowing that he was beginning a chapter of his life that would define him forever. Jim arrived at the military base with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The towering buildings, rows of uniformed soldiers, and the strict routines were unlike anything he had ever experienced. Everything felt bigger, faster, and more demanding than he had imagined. Yet deep inside, he knew this was where he belonged. From the very first day, it was clear that this new world would test not only his body, but also his mind and heart. The first few weeks were the hardest. Jim was pushed to wake up before dawn, run long distances, and complete physically exhausting exercises. Every day seemed to last forever, and every night he would fall asleep wondering if he was truly capable of meeting the standards expected of him. But as difficult as the training was, Jim found small victories that kept him motivated. Completing a difficult obstacle course, receiving praise from his instructors, or helping a fellow trainee through a challenging task gave him a sense of purpose. Each day, he learned a little more about himself and what it meant to be a soldier. Training was not just about physical endurance. It was about discipline, strategy, and leadership. Jim learned to work as part of a team, to listen carefully to instructions, and to make quick decisions under pressure. In the classroom, he studied maps, tactics, and communication skills. On the training field, he practiced drills, navigation, and emergency response. Every lesson built on the previous one, teaching him that success depended not only on individual effort, but also on cooperation and trust. Jim began to realize that being a soldier meant more than strength. It meant thinking clearly, acting responsibly, and putting the needs of the team above his own. The bonds Jim formed with his fellow trainees became one of the most important parts of his experience. They came from all walks of life, small towns, big cities, different cultures, and varying beliefs. Despite their differences, they shared a common goal: to serve their country and to become the best soldiers they could be. Jim quickly became known for his calm and supportive nature. When someone struggled with a task or felt discouraged, he was there to offer encouragement or lend a hand. His peers began to trust him, not just for his abilities, but for his integrity and reliability. These friendships would later become a source of strength during the most challenging moments of his career. During this time, Jim also learned about sacrifice in a deeper way. He missed birthdays, family gatherings, and simple comforts he had taken for granted at home. Letters from his parents and friends were his lifeline, reminding him of the love waiting for him beyond the base. He realized that service required putting the needs of others before his own desires. Sometimes it was hard, and loneliness crept in, but Jim accepted it as part of the journey. He reminded himself that the lessons he was learning and the experiences he was gaining would shape him into a leader capable of protecting and guiding others. One of the most challenging exercises was a simulated mission that tested the skills, judgment, and endurance of every trainee. Jim and his team were given limited supplies and a series of complex objectives to complete under time pressure. They had to navigate unfamiliar terrain, respond to unexpected obstacles, and make decisions that affected the success of the mission. During the exercise, Jim realized how much he had grown. He stayed calm when others panicked, offered practical solutions when problems arose, and made sure that no one on his team was left behind. Completing the mission successfully brought a deep sense of pride, but also a humble awareness that real-life challenges would be far more difficult. Throughout his training, Jim encountered mentors who left a lasting impact on him. Senior officers and instructors shared not only technical knowledge, but also wisdom about life, leadership, and responsibility. One instructor, in particular, took notice of Jim's dedication and integrity. He would often pull him aside to offer advice, saying, "Being a soldier is not just about what you can do with your hands. It's about what you do with your mind and heart." Those words stayed with Jim, shaping his understanding of service as something noble, thoughtful, and selfless. As weeks turned into months, Jim's confidence began to grow. He discovered that challenges he had once feared were now opportunities to learn and improve. Physical exercises that had once exhausted him became manageable, and complex tasks that had seemed impossible now felt achievable. He started to see himself not just as a trainee, but as someone capable of leading and making a difference. Yet he never let success make him complacent. Every achievement reminded him that there was always more to learn, more ways to grow, and more people to help along the way. Jim's first deployment orders came after he had completed several months of advanced training. The announcement was both thrilling and sobering. For the first time, the reality of leaving home for an uncertain mission settled in. He thought about his parents, his hometown, and the friends he had made over the years. There was pride in knowing he was about to serve in a meaningful capacity, but also a quiet fear of what lay ahead. He packed carefully, saying goodbye to his family with hugs, words of reassurance, and promises to write whenever possible. His parents hid their worry behind smiles, proud of the young man who had grown into a responsible and capable soldier. Once deployed, Jim experienced a side of military life that could not be taught in classrooms or during training exercises. Long hours, unpredictable schedules, and high-pressure situations became part of his daily routine. He witnessed both the resilience and the struggles of the soldiers around him. Some days were filled with small victories, helping civilians, completing missions efficiently, and seeing the positive impact of their efforts. Other days were heavy with frustration, uncertainty, and the weight of responsibility. Jim learned to navigate these extremes with patience, empathy, and focus. Even in difficult situations, Jim maintained a sense of purpose. He understood that every action, no matter how small, mattered. Whether he was leading a team through a complex task, providing guidance to a junior soldier, or simply offering a kind word to someone who was struggling, Jim knew that his role was more than executing orders. It was about supporting others and embodying the values of honor, integrity, and courage. These principles guided him in every decision and earned him the respect of his peers and superiors alike. One of the most important lessons Jim learned during his early service was the importance of adaptability. No plan ever went perfectly, and unexpected challenges often arose. Natural obstacles, logistical problems, and human factors required flexibility and quick thinking. Jim learned to stay calm, assess the situation, and make thoughtful choices, always keeping the safety and success of his team as the highest priority. Over time, he realized that true leadership was not about control, but about guidance, trust, and the ability to remain steady in the face of uncertainty. Throughout his deployment, Jim remained connected to his family and hometown. Letters, phone calls, and occasional visits reminded him of the life he had left behind and the people who loved him. These connections gave him strength and perspective, reinforcing why he had chosen this path. At the same time, he found a new sense of family among his fellow soldiers, a brotherhood built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and trust that could only be formed in difficult circumstances. By the time Jim completed his first deployment, he had transformed from a young recruit into a seasoned soldier. He had faced challenges he never imagined, learned lessons that could not be taught in books, and discovered a strength and resilience he did not know he possessed. But more importantly, he had developed a deep appreciation for teamwork, leadership, and the true meaning of service. Jim understood that being a soldier was not about personal glory. It was about commitment, courage, and the quiet acts of responsibility that made a difference in the lives of others. Returning home for a short leave after his first deployment was an emotional experience. Jim saw his parents and old friends with new eyes, appreciating the comfort of home while carrying the weight of the experiences he had gained. He shared stories cautiously, knowing that many of the challenges he faced were too complex to explain fully. Yet he also shared the lessons he had learned, the value of perseverance, the importance of teamwork, and the strength that comes from acting with integrity. These experiences shaped him not only as a soldier, but as a person, preparing him for the next chapter of his life and service. Jim's early years in service were a period of growth, learning, and self-discovery. Every challenge he faced, every bond he formed, and every lesson he learned strengthened him and prepared him for the responsibilities that lay ahead. He realized that service was not just a job, it was a calling, one that required courage, empathy, and unwavering dedication. And though the road was often difficult, Jim embraced it fully, knowing that the path he had chosen would define the man he was becoming and the legacy he would leave behind. After his first deployment, Jim returned to the base with a new sense of purpose, but also with a growing awareness of the sacrifices that came with military life. Service, he realized, was not just about following orders or completing missions. It was about facing situations that tested every part of a person's character. On this deployment, he would encounter moments that would challenge his courage, patience, and resolve in ways he had never imagined. The first few weeks were relatively calm, allowing Jim and his team to settle into routines. But soon, the reality of the mission became clear. The area where they were deployed was unpredictable and often dangerous. Weather conditions changed rapidly, communications were sometimes unreliable, and every decision had real consequences. Jim quickly learned that even the smallest mistakes could have significant outcomes. He relied heavily on the training he had received, using both his experience and intuition to guide his actions. Each day demanded focus, discipline, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. One of the most challenging moments came when Jim's unit was assigned a mission to deliver supplies to a remote area where civilians were struggling due to natural disasters and ongoing conflict. The journey was long and treacherous, with rough terrain and limited visibility. Jim was responsible for coordinating the route, ensuring that the team worked efficiently and keeping morale high during exhausting hours of travel. The physical and mental strain was intense. Soldiers had to remain alert, ready to respond to unexpected problems at any moment. Jim's leadership and calm demeanor were crucial in guiding his team safely to their destination. During this mission, Jim witnessed the resilience of the people he was serving in a way that left a lasting impact. Families had lost homes, children were hungry, and entire communities were struggling to survive. Despite these hardships, the people showed remarkable strength, welcoming the soldiers with gratitude and hope. Jim felt a deep sense of responsibility, not just to complete the mission, but to ensure that their efforts truly made a positive difference. The experience reminded him that service was not just about duty to one's country, but about helping others in meaningful ways, no matter how difficult the circumstances. While the mission was successful, it came with its own emotional challenges. Jim had to make decisions quickly, balancing risk and responsibility, knowing that every choice could affect lives. The weight of these decisions was heavy. Some days he would lie awake at night thinking about the outcomes, questioning if he had done everything he could. He began to understand that leadership was often about carrying burdens quietly, without seeking recognition. It was about making choices with integrity, even when the results were uncertain. In addition to the physical challenges, Jim faced the emotional strain of being away from his family for extended periods. He missed birthdays, holidays, and small moments that he had once taken for granted. Letters and phone calls from his parents and friends were precious reminders of home, but they also brought a bittersweet sense of longing. Jim realized that sacrifice was a constant companion of military life. It required letting go of comfort and personal desires, putting the needs of the mission and the team above all else. This understanding deepened his sense of purpose, even when the days felt long and exhausting. The deployment also tested Jim's ability to lead in high-pressure situations. There were times when unexpected obstacles arose: sudden storms, equipment failures, or tense interactions with local communities. In those moments, Jim had to think quickly, assess the situation, and act decisively. He learned that leadership was not about controlling every detail, but about guiding others, maintaining trust, and staying steady when chaos surrounded him. These lessons, sometimes learned through trial and error, strengthened his confidence and prepared him for even greater responsibilities in the future. During his time in the field, Jim also formed bonds that would last a lifetime. The soldiers around him were more than colleagues; they became family. They shared long hours of work, moments of laughter, and the challenges of uncertainty. Jim's calm and supportive nature made him a trusted figure among his peers. He would often help them navigate difficult situations, provide encouragement, or simply listen when someone needed to talk. These relationships were built on mutual respect and shared experience, and they became a source of strength during the most demanding parts of the deployment. One particularly difficult moment came when Jim and his team were caught in a sudden storm while returning from a mission. Visibility was low, the ground was slippery, and communication with other units was limited. Jim remained calm, coordinating the team carefully and ensuring that everyone stayed safe. The experience was exhausting, both physically and mentally, but it highlighted the importance of preparation, teamwork, and trust. When they finally reached safety, there was a shared sense of relief and accomplishment that strengthened the bonds within the unit. Jim realized that these moments, though challenging, were where true courage and leadership were revealed. Throughout the deployment, Jim kept a journal, writing down experiences, lessons learned, and reflections on the people he met. He wanted to remember not just the missions, but the human stories, the resilience, kindness, and struggles of those around him. Writing became a way to process his experiences and maintain perspective. It reminded him that every challenge, no matter how difficult, could also be an opportunity to grow, learn, and make a positive impact. Despite the difficulties, there were also moments of joy and connection. Jim and his team would share stories, play games, and find small ways to celebrate achievements. They supported each other through homesickness, fatigue, and uncertainty. These simple moments created a sense of community and reminded them of why they were serving. Jim began to understand that service was as much about building relationships and trust as it was about completing tasks. The camaraderie among the soldiers became one of the most rewarding aspects of his deployment. As the months went on, Jim grew increasingly aware of the toll that service could take on both body and mind. The long hours, constant pressure, and exposure to difficult situations required careful attention to physical and emotional health. Jim developed routines to maintain strength and resilience, including exercise, reflection, and open communication with his team. He also learned to recognize when someone was struggling and how to offer support without judgment. These skills not only helped him personally, but also made him a more effective leader. Towards the end of this deployment, Jim faced a situation that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A local village was in urgent need of aid due to a recent disaster. Jim and his team were tasked with delivering supplies, coordinating with local leaders, and ensuring the safety of everyone involved. The mission required careful planning, quick thinking, and a great deal of patience. Jim led the team with determination, navigating challenges with calm focus. When they successfully completed the mission, the gratitude of the villagers was overwhelming. Jim felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that their efforts had made a real difference in people's lives. Returning from this deployment, Jim had changed in many ways. He was stronger, wiser, and more aware of the complexities of service. He had faced situations that tested his courage, patience, and leadership, and he had emerged with a deeper understanding of responsibility and sacrifice. He realized that true service was not measured by recognition or medals, but by the quiet acts of courage, empathy, and integrity that made a meaningful difference in the lives of others. Jim also carried with him the lessons of humility. He understood that no one accomplishes great things alone. Success was always a product of teamwork, guidance, and trust. He appreciated the support of his fellow soldiers, the mentorship of his instructors, and the encouragement of his family. Every experience, whether challenging or rewarding, reinforced the importance of staying grounded, remaining compassionate, and leading by example. As Jim prepared to return home for a brief leave, he reflected on his journey so far. The early months of his service had been filled with growth, challenge, and learning. He had faced physical and emotional trials, learned the meaning of true leadership, and experienced the impact of his actions on the lives of others. He felt a deep sense of pride, not in personal achievement, but in the opportunity to serve and make a difference. Even in moments of rest, Jim's mind often wandered back to the people he had met and the experiences he had lived. He thought about the families, children, and communities that had touched him, and about the soldiers who had become his closest friends. These memories reminded him why he had chosen this path and reinforced his commitment to continue serving with honor and integrity. Jim returned home briefly, greeted by the familiar sights and sounds of his hometown. His parents welcomed him with open arms, proud of the man he had become. Friends and neighbors admired his dedication, though few could fully understand the challenges he had faced. During this leave, Jim shared what he could, stories of teamwork, lessons learned, and moments of human resilience. But he also carried a quiet understanding that some experiences were too complex to be explained. The journey of service, he knew, was one that shaped a person in ways both visible and invisible. As he left home to continue his service, Jim felt a mix of gratitude and anticipation. He was proud of what he had accomplished, but he knew that greater challenges lay ahead. Every mission, every decision, and every moment of leadership would shape him further. He understood that service required constant growth, selflessness, and courage. And as he looked toward the future, he was ready to embrace it fully, carrying the lessons of sacrifice, empathy, and resilience with him. After years of deployment and training, Captain James "Jim" Harrison returned home with a sense of accomplishment, but also with a deep awareness of the responsibilities that came with service. While the missions and challenges of the field were behind him for the time being, his life remained full of purpose. Retirement from active duty was approaching, but Jim's dedication to serving others did not end with leaving the military. He felt a calling to continue making a difference, this time in a different way, through mentorship, community service, and helping veterans navigate life after service. Jim began volunteering at local veterans programs almost immediately after retirement. He wanted to offer guidance, support, and advice to those who were adjusting to civilian life after experiencing the unique challenges of military service. Many veterans struggled with finding jobs, managing their emotions, and reconnecting with their families. Jim shared his own experiences openly, not just the successes, but also the hardships he had faced during deployments. His honesty helped others feel understood and inspired them to keep moving forward. He realized that the lessons he had learned about leadership, resilience, and responsibility could have a lasting impact beyond the battlefield. One of Jim's earliest projects involved mentoring young officers who were just starting their careers. These men and women came to him seeking guidance on how to lead effectively, balance duty with personal life, and maintain integrity under pressure. Jim treated each mentee with patience, listening carefully to their questions and concerns before offering advice. He emphasized that leadership was not about authority or power, but about responsibility, empathy, and making decisions that benefited others. Many of the young officers later credited Jim's mentorship with helping them become confident, ethical leaders in their own right. In addition to mentorship, Jim devoted time to helping veterans with practical challenges. He assisted with job applications, resume writing, and interview preparation, understanding that the transition from military to civilian life could be intimidating. He also helped organize community events to raise awareness about veterans' needs and to build networks of support. Through these efforts, Jim became a respected figure not just in military circles, but in the wider community as well. People admired him for his dedication, humility, and unwavering commitment to helping others. Jim also found ways to give back in smaller, quieter ways. He visited hospitals, spending time with veterans recovering from injuries or dealing with long-term health challenges. He would listen to their stories, offer encouragement, and sometimes simply sit in silence with them, letting them know they were not forgotten. These moments were deeply meaningful to him. He understood that service extended far beyond missions and medals. It was about being present, offering support, and showing compassion whenever and wherever it was needed. As Jim continued his work, he became increasingly involved in public speaking engagements. Schools, community centers, and local organizations invited him to share his experiences and insights. He spoke not just about the military, but about values such as integrity, perseverance, teamwork, and empathy. His stories were relatable and inspiring, connecting with audiences of all ages. Jim often emphasized that courage was not just for soldiers. It was something everyone could practice in daily life by facing challenges honestly, helping others, and staying true to their principles. During this time, Jim also focused on his family in ways he had not been able to during active service. He spent more time with his parents, siblings, and extended family, attending birthdays, holidays, and simple gatherings that he had often missed. He developed close relationships with his children, sharing with them the lessons he had learned about responsibility, courage, and service. Jim believed that true leadership started at home, and he wanted to be a positive role model for his family as well as for his community. These personal connections became a source of joy and balance in his life, reminding him that service was not only outward, but also inward, toward the people you love. One of the most rewarding aspects of this phase of Jim's life was seeing the long-term impact of his mentorship and community work. Veterans who had struggled to find their footing after leaving service now thrived in civilian life. Young officers he had guided were leading their teams with confidence and integrity. Communities that had benefited from his initiatives were stronger and more connected. Jim saw the tangible results of dedication, empathy, and perseverance, reinforcing his belief that service could take many forms and that even small actions could create meaningful change. Despite his accomplishments, Jim remained humble. He did not seek recognition or praise. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had helped others, strengthened his community, and contributed to the lives of those around him. He often reflected on his journey, from a young boy in a small coastal town to a captain who had served his country and now served his community. The lessons of discipline, resilience, and empathy that had guided him through military life continued to shape his actions and decisions. In his later years, Jim also took on the role of historian and storyteller, documenting the experiences of veterans and preserving their stories for future generations. He believed that the sacrifices, challenges, and victories of those who served should never be forgotten. Through writing, interviews, and community presentations, he highlighted the human side of service, the courage, perseverance, and humanity that often went unnoticed. Jim understood that these stories could inspire others, teach valuable lessons, and honor the legacy of those who had dedicated their lives to protecting and helping others. Jim's life during this phase was full, yet he continued to find ways to grow and learn. He took courses, attended workshops, and connected with people from different backgrounds to broaden his understanding of leadership, service, and community development. He encouraged others to pursue lifelong learning, emphasizing that personal growth and service were ongoing journeys. Even after retirement, Jim never stopped striving to be the best version of himself, demonstrating through example that dedication, curiosity, and empathy could create a life of meaning and impact. One particularly memorable project involved creating a support network for veterans struggling with emotional and mental health challenges. Jim coordinated with psychologists, counselors, and community leaders to provide resources, workshops, and one-on-one support. He understood that many veterans faced invisible struggles, and he wanted to ensure they knew they were not alone. His approach combined empathy, organization, and practical guidance, and the network became a lifeline for many in need. Jim felt proud not because of personal recognition, but because he knew he had helped others find strength, hope, and healing. Throughout all his efforts, Jim never forgot the importance of personal reflection. He often spent quiet evenings walking along the coast near his hometown, thinking about his life, his choices, and the people he had met along the way. The waves, the seagulls, and the familiar smell of salt water reminded him of his beginnings, the lessons of his parents, and the dreams he had held as a child. Reflection helped him remain grounded, appreciate his journey, and approach each day with intention, humility, and gratitude. Jim's work also inspired others to serve in their own ways. People who observed his dedication began volunteering, mentoring, and helping those in need. His actions created a ripple effect, demonstrating that service was not limited to a uniform or a title. It was a mindset, a commitment to making the world better wherever possible. Jim often said that the most meaningful accomplishments were the ones that inspired others to act with kindness, courage, and integrity. Even as age caught up with him, Jim remained active and engaged. He continued mentoring, volunteering, and advocating for veterans. He adapted to new challenges, embraced change, and approached each day with the same discipline and empathy that had defined his military service. His presence in the community became a symbol of dedication, resilience, and the lasting impact of a life committed to service. Through it all, Jim's legacy grew quietly but powerfully. The soldiers he mentored, the veterans he supported, and the communities he served carried forward his lessons, values, and example. People spoke of his humility, courage, and kindness. They remembered him not only for his achievements, but for the way he made them feel seen, supported, and inspired. Jim's life became a testament to the idea that service, whether on the battlefield or in everyday life, could leave a lasting and meaningful impact. In this stage of his life, Jim understood that true leadership and service were about more than personal success. They were about lifting others, sharing wisdom, and creating opportunities for growth and healing. Every action, every word of encouragement, and every initiative he led had a purpose: to make life better for someone else. And as he looked back on his journey, he realized that these contributions, small or large, were the truest measure of a life well lived. Jim's story became a source of inspiration for many. It showed that courage, integrity, and empathy were not limited to a battlefield. They could be expressed in everyday life, in acts of mentorship, in community service, and in caring for those around us. His legacy was not measured by medals or titles alone, but by the countless lives he touched, the lessons he imparted, and the hope he inspired. Jim had dedicated his life to service, and in doing so, he had left the world a better place than he had found it. Years passed, and Captain James "Jim" Harrison grew older, but his spirit of service remained as strong as ever. Even in retirement, he remained active in his community, always looking for ways to help others, mentor young leaders, and support veterans. He had lived a life full of purpose, a life dedicated to duty, integrity, and compassion. Yet Jim knew that life was fragile, and that every moment should be cherished. He spent his days balancing meaningful work with time spent with family, friends, and the people who had become part of his extended family. As the years went on, Jim's health slowly began to decline. The years of rigorous physical activity, deployments, and the natural passage of time had taken their toll. Still, he remained determined to continue his work and to make the most of each day. Friends, family, and fellow veterans often reminded him to rest, but Jim believed that service was never truly complete, and he wanted to continue giving back for as long as he could. He found joy in the small moments, sharing a meal with his children, listening to stories from young soldiers, attending community events, or simply walking along the coast near his hometown, reflecting on the life he had built. One morning, Jim did not wake up as usual. The news of his passing spread slowly at first, then quickly, leaving a profound sense of loss in the hearts of everyone who had known him. For his family, the loss was immeasurable. His children, siblings, and parents grieved deeply, remembering not just the father, brother, or son they had loved, but the man whose life had been a shining example of courage, integrity, and kindness. Friends and neighbors shared stories of Jim's humility and generosity, recalling the countless ways he had helped, guided, and inspired them over the years. The community came together to honor Jim's life and service. A memorial service was planned, attended by family, friends, fellow veterans, local leaders, and many who had been touched by his work. People shared stories, recounting moments when Jim had helped them find hope, courage, or direction in their lives. Each story revealed a different facet of Jim's character: his calm guidance, unwavering integrity, patience, kindness, and ability to inspire others to be their best selves. The room was filled with both tears and gratitude, a mix of sadness for his loss and appreciation for the extraordinary life he had led. Veterans spoke of Jim's mentorship, describing how he had helped them transition from military life to civilian life, offering guidance, encouragement, and practical advice. Young officers remembered the lessons he had taught them about leadership, integrity, and responsibility. Community members shared how Jim had inspired them to serve others, volunteer, and act with compassion. Each voice added to the mosaic of his legacy, painting a picture of a man who had lived fully, served faithfully, and touched countless lives in quiet yet meaningful ways. Jim's family took comfort in knowing that his life had made a lasting difference. They spoke of his humility, his devotion to service, and the example he had set for his children. He had not sought fame or recognition. His satisfaction had come from knowing that he had helped others, guided them, and made their lives a little better. They realized that the values he had embodied, courage, empathy, dedication, and integrity, would continue to inspire future generations, both within their family and in the wider community. Among the many tributes, one of the most poignant was the presence of the soldiers he had served with. They spoke of Jim not just as a leader, but as a friend, a mentor, and a source of strength. He had been the calm in the storm, the voice of reason in moments of uncertainty, and the steady hand guiding the team through challenges. His leadership had not relied on authority or intimidation, but on trust, respect, and the quiet demonstration of his values. These qualities had left an indelible mark on everyone who had served alongside him. During the service, letters and messages from people across the country were read aloud. Veterans, community members, and even strangers shared how Jim's life had influenced them. Some wrote about the mentorship he had provided, others about the encouragement he had offered during difficult times, and many simply expressed gratitude for having known someone whose life exemplified service and integrity. The messages painted a picture of a man who had lived not for himself, but for others, and whose legacy would continue long after his passing. Jim's life story became an inspiration beyond his immediate community. Schools, local organizations, and military programs began sharing his story, highlighting the lessons he had embodied: the importance of perseverance, empathy, and leadership guided by integrity. His life showed that courage was not always about grand gestures or battlefield heroics. It was about daily acts of kindness, responsibility, and commitment to helping others. Teachers used his example to teach young people about service and character. Veterans programs honored him by establishing awards in his name for mentorship and leadership. Jim's life had become a beacon, a model for living with purpose and compassion. In the days following his passing, people reflected on the lessons they had learned from Jim. Many realized that his approach to life was simple but profound: to serve others, to act with integrity, and to lead by example. He had shown that true strength was measured not by personal success, but by the positive impact one could have on the lives of others. His story reminded people that anyone could make a difference, regardless of their title, position, or resources. Courage, empathy, and dedication were qualities that anyone could practice in daily life, and Jim had embodied them fully. Jim's family established a small memorial in his hometown, a quiet place where people could come to remember him, reflect on his life, and find inspiration. The memorial included photographs, letters, and stories of the lives he had touched. It became a place of connection, where veterans, community members, and young people could come to honor his example and to consider how they might serve others in their own ways. For Jim's family, it was a reminder that his spirit of service would continue, influencing generations to come. Even as memories of Jim's life were shared, his influence continued in practical ways. Programs he had started or supported continued to thrive, helping veterans find employment, assisting families in need, and providing mentorship to young leaders. People who had learned from him passed on the lessons he had taught, ensuring that his values lived on through action. Jim had created a legacy not through fame or wealth, but through compassion, leadership, and dedication to service. The ripple effect of his life was felt far and wide, touching people in ways he could never have imagined. Jim's story also reminded people of the importance of gratitude. Many who attended his memorial spoke of the simple but profound truth: to appreciate those who serve, not only in the military but in every aspect of life. His life was a reminder that acts of service, big or small, mattered deeply. People left the memorial inspired to act with more compassion, to help others, and to live with integrity. Jim had shown them that one person's dedication could create lasting change, and that service was a path to both personal fulfillment and societal good. As the final tributes were shared, one thing became clear: Jim's life had been a testament to the power of service, integrity, and compassion. He had lived fully, faced challenges with courage, and dedicated himself to helping others. His impact would continue to be felt through the people he had mentored, the veterans he had supported, the communities he had strengthened, and the family who carried his values forward. Jim's legacy was not measured in awards or recognition, but in the countless lives he had touched, the hope he had inspired, and the example he had set. In the quiet moments after the memorial, Jim's family and friends reflected on his life. They thought about the young boy who had watched the harbor, dreaming of adventure and purpose, the young soldier learning the ropes of service, the captain leading with courage and integrity, and the mentor, volunteer, and community leader who had touched so many lives. Each stage of his life had built on the last, creating a story of dedication, resilience, and compassion. Jim had lived a life that others could look up to, not for its grandeur, but for its humanity. Even though Jim was no longer physically present, his story continued to inspire. Veterans shared it with new recruits, teachers shared it with students, families shared it with children. His life became a model of what it meant to live with purpose, to serve others selflessly, and to approach each day with courage, empathy, and integrity. Jim's example reminded everyone that service was not limited to a uniform or a title. It was a way of life, a choice to make the world a better place through daily actions and thoughtful leadership. As time passed, Jim's name became synonymous with dedication and service in his community. People remembered him not only for the sacrifices he had made and the missions he had completed, but for the way he had treated others, with kindness, respect, and unwavering integrity. He had shown that true heroes are not only those who face danger in battle, but also those who face life with courage, compassion, and a commitment to helping others. Jim's life in its entirety was a testament to the power of service. From a small coastal town to the military, and finally to the community he had helped build and strengthen, he had lived with purpose and meaning. His story inspired countless people to act with courage, lead with integrity, and serve others without expectation of reward. Even in death, Captain Jim Harrison's legacy lived on, a reminder that a life devoted to service leaves a mark far beyond what the eye can see, touching hearts, shaping communities, and inspiring generations.